Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week our guest, our chief Washington correspondent for the New York Times, Carl Hulse, and Israeli foreign policy expert and journalist Alon Pinkas. Remember, we love taking your questions, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. Now, we're going to get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. And please check out the link to our sponsor, ExpressVPN, in our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting our sponsors because it really helps make this podcast happen. Please tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. James, this is the great sports season, as we were saying the other day. Major League Baseball playoffs, the NFL is going, and NBA is starting its exhibitions at least. But the story of this week is the Philadelphia Phillies. It is an extraordinary story. They have power actually, the story this week is the Washington Nationals Alumni Club, because it's Bryce Harper and it's Trey Turner and it's Kyle Schwarber. And it's just the most impressive display of both hitting and pitching that I've seen in a long time. I think this is just an awesome team that's peaking at just the right time.
Well, I'll tell you something. I like the Phillies just because I love the way they play. Now, I love to watch them play. I mean, they play, they're having fun, they want to win, they're competitive as crazy, they pull for each other, they're kind of one with their fans. It's just a more interesting dynamic than Arizona has, and it's pretty easy to see. But the one thing that I do like, and I wish we could do more of it, is daytime baseball in October. I just love like a 3 o'clock first pitch game, or back when you had 4, you'd have a 1 o'clock first pitch in Central Time. And man, I don't know why. Just memories of my childhood. The weather is like actually pretty good down here. It's fall baseball. I love it. It's great.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, but I think we know the answer. The answer is money. They make more money at night than they do during the day.
You argue with them, and I say, yeah, you do, but over a period of time. The Super Bowl starts at 6 o'clock Eastern Time, all right? That seems to be pretty good. They're not doing too bad, as opposed to like starting the World Series at 8:30 Eastern Time.
Yep.
I mean, maybe sometimes you got to take a little bit of a short-term hit to build in a long-term brand. But, they have to go against the NFL a lot of World Series games, but they could. But you're right. If they started the game, they'd lose some audience on the West Coast. But I think you'd build audience with better starting times. College football, Deion Sanders, probably a big story.
Well, wait. Just before we go, Deion, because I think you made a good point. The other thing you're losing by not having daytime games is young viewers. You're not getting some of those. I mean, I fell in love with baseball at age 7. And if games are played at 8:30 at night, I can't watch it. But I was
alluding to Deion's comments on start times. He said, who in the hell wants to start at 9 o'clock?
Right,
Nobody.
Right.
And he said, what are you going to do? What do you do with my woman? Do with my players all day? I mean, I talk about the game so much. Is Deion's observation that I completely agree with. They stagger these starts, and these kids end up start playing games at 9 o'clock at night, and the game starts at 11 o'clock Eastern Time. And so no one gets to see you on TV. You got to sit in the freaking hotel all day. They got to rethink these start times.
Yeah, I agree. You picking the Phillies to go all the way?
But you don't want me to pick anybody to go all the way in baseball. There's no one's ever right about anything. I'm a modest enough fan. I was a little disappointed in the round that these games haven't gone that many. The best out of 3, and most of them won 2 in a row. I'm pulling for 7 games. I mean, I want the Phillies to win, but I would rather the Phillies, lose in 7 and win in 6. That's me. I want the Phillies to win at the end of the day, but I really want 7 games.
Well, I would just add, in addition to that team, which is as as compelling as you just said those fans or something. You know, they don't sit down; they stand up. They're tough.
Harper, that guy.
They are so avid, and James, I'll tell you, your record may not be that good, but mine is really quite prescient. I confidently predicted a Dodgers-Braves World Series, and so we see how good I am on this. But,
well, I don't think you can have a Dodgers-Braves World Series. I don't mean to correct you.
That was part of the problem. Anyway, yeah. But you know, you just don't know. Somebody comes in. You know, well, let's wait and see. Well, you couldn't be hotter than the Philadelphia Phillies are right now.
No. And you couldn't have better team chemistry.
Right.
And people are, you know, Nola, he fixed something with his delivery, and it's really made a difference. And, you know, they got some pretty, you know, let's see, but they seem to be in position to do pretty well.
So why did our team give up all those guys and not get much in return?
You know, I guess I'd say baseball teams evolve. We're evolving the wrong way.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But, you know, they won a few more games than people thought they would this year.
They did a little bit better. It depends on whether some of those minor league potential superstars, including the guy who just graduated from just. So
how'd you like to be a San Diego Padres fan?
Oh man.
God.
Man. Or the California Angels.
Yeah. I mean wow.
God.
You know, I tell you, you talk about like the great stuff that you got to put in what Red Auerbach did, or what John Wooden did, or what Casey Stengel did, or what Bill Belichick did. I'll tell you what I would put right up there. Of course, you had the cheating and things that ever. But Houston has been to the American League Championship game 7 years in a row.
Right.
That does not happen in this sports environment, in this kind of competition. Now, is it the same as, you know, 10 out of 11 NCAA championships? Doesn't take the same ring, but my goddamn, it's hard in this kind of environment, particularly in baseball or football, 7 times in a row to get to the league championship series.
Remember, I guess about 10 years ago when they were awful, and Sports Illustrated put them on the cover and said the team is the future, and everybody laughed and said, "Oh, come on, man! They were so right. They have been the team of the future." Actually, a couple of great. I mean, Atlanta's a great franchise.
Oh,
of course, the Dodgers with their money are always in there.
Look, what about Tampa Bay? Mm-hmm. That's about it. Just get that guy. Shit, you know you're going to win 92 games. I mean, the thing is, in professional sports, Major League Baseball is most unpredictable. Football, second. Pro basketball is fairly predictable.
Yeah. College basketball, less so.
Less so, yes. It used to be more predictable, running out. And I saw the college basketball magazines. You know, it's kind of hard to follow it, college basketball, till after the first of the year. But, you know, I looked at the SEC looks like they got 5 in the top 25, but I think Tennessee's 9. That's the highest ranking they got. Mm-hmm. But I don't see a lot of surprises there either.
No, I don't either.
How's Wake Forest going to be this year?
I can't. I tell you something. They got a big kid who started at LSU named Reed, and then he transferred to Gonzaga. He was pretty good at LSU, and for some reason, I guess he lost the coach. He transferred to Gonzaga and was so. And the question is, is he eligible? If you've transferred twice, it's a harder test. He's pretty good, and he would be. They're terrific on the perimeter. They're very good on the perimeter, and if they get him, I think they'll be a pretty good team.
Well, we would be aspirational to get 500 in the conference, but the women's basketball team, Jesus,
number 1 in the country.
And I think they're better this year than last year. They're going to play a women's basketball game. Remember, I have a prediction. I have no inside information. When Nebraska did that volleyball game in Cornhusker Stadium, and there's 80,000 for a women's volleyball game, mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if we play a basketball game in the Tiger Stadium on Sunday afternoon and, march or something like that. But, man, what they have done for women's sports in Baton Rouge is just, it's unbelievable. And then, when you look at, even Sha'Carri Williams, Richardson, what she's been able to do, it's pretty remarkable, the explosion. And, gymnastics, we won the Final Four. And basketball, we won the Final Four. I mean, we're getting better in softball. But women's sports, we never thought we'd see this in our lifetime. I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
You read the paper, you watch movies, you watch anything, and that's all. It means whole companies all over the world that do nothing but sit there and hack into people's computers. Yes, big problem.
Well, then just imagine for a second how much time you spend online using your phone. We buy cars, personal products, send pictures to our loved ones, have conversations with people that should stay privileged, and that's why it's so scary that your phone carrier collects data on whatever it is you're doing. They say it's so they can, quote, better understand your interest, end quote. But really all they want is to sell your activity to advertisers, things like the sites you've visited and what you've been up to online. And the more they can get on you, the larger their paycheck becomes, which is why we can use ExpressVPN to fight back. ExpressVPN is an app that prevents your phone carrier from being able to see the sites you visit and sell it off to third parties. All it takes is one tap of a button, and all of your network data gets encrypted and rerouted through ExpressVPN's secure servers for ultimate privacy. Not only does it shield your web browsing, ExpressVPN protects all of your network data, so you can stay private even when you're using your favorite apps. Now, whether you're an iPhone, Android, or even a tablet user, ExpressVPN works on all your devices. The best part is one subscription can be used for up to 5 devices at the same time. So we have our whole families using ExpressVPN at the same time. When your phone carrier tracks you, there's a gross invasion of privacy. You can either keep letting them cash in on you or visit expressvpn.com/warroom to get the same VPN we use. Take back your online privacy today and use our link to get 3 extra months free. That's expressvpn.com/warroom. Again, expressvpn.com/warroom. You also can start protecting yourself online with a link in our show notes. Hey, James, as the situation grows more tense in the Middle East, President Biden makes an historic trip to Israel after it suffered its worst day when Hamas attacked and slaughtered more than 1,000 Israelis. And this week, a hospital in Gaza was devastated, with Hamas and Israel saying it was the other guy that did it. To help us understand these intense cross currents and dangers is Alon Pinkas, a former Israeli national security advisor and now a prominent columnist there. Alon, there appears almost a conundrum here. It was, I accept the fact that it was the Hamas ally that probably misfired that missile, but nevertheless, it set off rage on the Arab streets. Leaders refused to meet President Biden. The situation has really gotten worse over the last couple of days, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, to be honest, guys, that was inevitable. I mean, there's no way it could get better. The chances of a status quo were slim, and so it had, something had to give, and it became worse. Look, when there's so much firepower concentrated in an area so dense, it's the most densely populated strip of land on this planet with 2.2 million people. Things like what happened at the hospital are bound to happen. Now, the fact that it wasn't, according to all ballistic indications, that it wasn't Israel but a Hamas misfire, and the fact that it may not have been 500 deaths, but 308, makes no difference in terms of the magnitude of what had happened. And I have some bad news for you. This is probably going to get worse.
Yeah, I think it is. You wrote that for all the visible, and I would say eloquent support that President Biden has given the Israelis, that there has been a paradigm shift with this in U.S.-Israeli relations. Tell us how. Tell us why.
Well, the paradigm shift is evident via Biden's actions, and I will elaborate on that in a moment. But it's been in the making for the better part of the last decade. You have a prime minister, Mr. Netanyahu, who has been playing and messing and meddling in American politics for a long time. Who has distanced himself and basically alienated most of the Democrats. This started, and James Carville right here would remember that as vividly, if not more vividly than I. This began in the 90s when he declared a bromance with Newt Gingrich against Bill Clinton. And it went on during the Obama years, and then his love fest with Donald Trump. And so you saw the cracks in the relationship. Now, then there's a geopolitical or strategic layer to this. The U.S. in the last decade has been disengaging from the Middle East. It is focused on China being the main challenge for the next few decades. It is exhausted, fatigued, and no longer interested in fighting or entangling itself in wars like Afghanistan or Iraq. And there's no chance of a peace process between Israel and the Palestinians, and the U.S. began to shift positions. Now we come fast forward to this visit and to this visit by Biden and this crisis and this war that began October 7th. What you see, the signs of this paradigm shift, is that the U.S. seems to be missing or having very little confidence in the quality of Israeli decision-making. It has almost zero confidence in the leadership skills and the abilities and competency of Mr. Netanyahu. It is sending a carrier strike force, the Gerald Ford, and another aircraft carrier, the Dwight Eisenhower, and a 2,000-strong Marine Corps rapid response team, and putting the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain on high alert. And you ask yourself, wait, the Hamas attack was savage, barbaric, devastating, agonizing, but it's Hamas. This is not World War II, and this is not the German army. Okay, why would the U.S. need to send these kind of forces? Okay, so the U.S. answered that partially by saying to deter regional actors, namely Iran and Hezbollah, from expanding, escalating, spreading the conflict, as Antony Blinken has said. But you have to conclude that, Blinken being here twice, the U.S. dispatching forces on that magnitude, and then the president himself, Joe Biden, coming here, shows a lack of confidence that the U.S. has in Israel right now. And possibly, this is me guesstimating or speculating, if you will, possibly not 100% certain that Israel can defend itself without American help in the event of escalation. This is where the paradigm shift. Look, Al, the Secretary of State of the United States of America sat down yesterday, Tuesday, for 6 whole hours in an Israeli war cabinet meeting. When did you ever hear of anything like this happening to, in a fellow allied democracy? Never. And so I see those signs.
Picking up on your intriguing point that they worry about a larger conflict, do you have any sense of how Iran and Hezbollah, do they see this as an opportunity? If they did, should they have done it earlier? Is there how dangerous is it right now?
Well, it's very dangerous and it's very volatile. It's very difficult for me to get into the heads of Iranians or Hezbollah. But there's no question now. There's no question that, they're in this for the chaos, for the anarchy, for the instability. I wouldn't be surprised in a few months or a few short years' time to see that the Russians were involved in this too, to sow discord and viewing everything as vis-a-vis America, the U.S. as a zero-sum game. And so they're trying to lure Israel into this. Now, the tiniest of miscalculations, the slimmest of misperceptions could lead to hell breaking loose, which is what Biden ostensibly said he wants to prevent, which is something he apparently believes Israel cannot handle on its own, which, again, is somewhat humiliating given the size of our military and the decades of bragging of how good our intelligence is and how good, or the early warning, and how good the platforms and the technology and the cyber warfare capabilities. Now, as of now, it seems like Iran is reticent to get involved. They apparently understand the consequences shortly after Mr. Biden's warnings last week in his speech at the White House on Tuesday. But to tell you that this escalation won't happen as a result of that miscalculation I mentioned, I would not bet against that.
Well, Alon, one test may be what happens in the ensuing days and weeks in Gaza. Biden has, I think, quite clearly said to Netanyahu, go in, but go in quickly and get out.
Right.
That really conflicts with Netanyahu's promise to eradicate Hamas. You can't do that. You can't do both. You can't go in, get out quickly, and eradicate Hamas. So what gives?
Oh, nothing gives because Netanyahu, he's all about speeches and and noises and chest pumping. For 15 years, he's been promising and bragging that I will eradicate Hamas, I will obliterate Hamas, I will eliminate Hamas, I will dismantle Hamas, I will do this to Hamas. Hamas will never be stand up on its feet again. Well, lo and behold, they are. And so when the president says, do what you need to do, seek and exact the justice and the retribution that you rightly and justifiably deserve, but be careful not to go into Gaza because that would suck you into a quagmire that would leave you there. He just today, before he left, he said, take example from 9/11. We had this rage in us, he said, Biden said, and we sought and got our justice, but we made many mistakes on the way. Learn from our experience. Now, okay, that's great, but you made a great point. The two are not reconcilable. The two cannot, it's like we should remove the communist regime in Hanoi, but we will not do anything in South Vietnam. Come on, it's either that or not. It's either or. Israel cannot eliminate Hamas without a major ground operation. That's as simple as that. A ground operation is by definition going to be bloody, lengthy, and costly. So a decision needs to be made. It's almost a binary choice.
James Carville.
So, sir, I want to be clear that I heard what I thought I'd heard. And I thought I heard you say that the United States has lost confidence in Israeli intelligence and Israeli military strategy.
Well, in Mr. Netanyahu.
In Netanyahu, but
yes, correct. Yes, I did say that. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a pretty stunning place for a country like Israel to be when it's at war. And honestly, the only real ally it has right now is the United States.
That's right.
But at any rate, so here we are. My grandson's dad is a pretty observant Jewish guy from the north side of Chicago. And they've always talk about they were going to take, him to Jerusalem, and my daughter would take him to Rome and the holy sites. How do I get the all clear when I can tell my son-in-law, okay, y'all can go now? How does this end? Okay, no one has said, all right, these are 3 ways this thing ends, and I don't know of a single one. So help me.
Well, there are 2 possibilities here, James. One is that Israel goes into Gaza, does what it does successful, semi-successful, or unsuccessful, and essentially stays in Gaza. That was the story of 20 years ago, and that was the story of how we got stuck in Lebanon for so long, until Ehud Barak, prime minister, whom James knows very well, until he got us out in May of the year 2000. Now, so either we go in or we don't go in, and and this ping pong remains. But in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, everything's going to be quiet and tranquil again, and your grandson can go to Jerusalem and visit the holy sites, whether Christian or Jewish. I don't know, because there's a possibility here, James, that this will be expanded or escalated into the West Bank and Jerusalem. Now, I'm not a prophet of doom. I'm not saying this is necessarily going to happen. I'm trying to look for a silver lining here, which I think is basically what Biden tried to convey. And I do see a political change in Israel after after the dust, so to speak, settles. I think your grandson, within 3-4 weeks, could come to Israel confidently and securely.
Really? Right?
Yeah.
Well, you're in a position to know.
No, I'm not. I'm not. But I know what you're saying. He's your grandson, and you care just about him. But you can have a mass shooting at a Target in Chicago or in Dallas.
Clearly. And, the best time to fly on an airline is right after one of their planes crash. Because that's the safest flight you're going to ever have in your life. So the United States, we went all in on Israel's side. We were not equivocal at all. Is it a fair point to say, well, maybe we're not going to be accepted as a broker in any kind of peace deal? That other people are going to look at us as a belligerent in this contest, not a Switzerland or a benign power or anything. Do you think that was a consideration that they made, and they said, no, we got to do this because if we don't, it'll end worse?
You mean, James, the U.S. being a mediator between Israel and Hamas?
Yeah, what I'm saying is because the United States has taken, right, but whatever, but an intermediary for the whole thing.
Look, the U.S. has been scarred and hemorrhaged and fatigued and lost reputation and expended political capital. Bill Clinton did that, and Barack Obama did that, and even Trump, to a limited degree, did that. The U.S., as of 2014, that was when John Kerry was Secretary of State, essentially stopped mediating between Israel and the U.S. and the Palestinians. The U.S., they said repeatedly since the Bill Clinton years, cannot want peace more than the parties. Okay, you recall Bill Clinton's parameters, that final speech that he made in December of 2000 upon leaving office in January of 2001, in which he said, this is my vision of what can theoretically be agreed on. This is what I think can be done, and this is what the U.S. sees as agreeable, and what the U.S. sees as, at this point, unbridgeable. So successive U.S. administrations followed Bill Clinton's leads, and the last was Obama in 2014, and it's been 9 years. And so I don't think the U.S. wants to get involved unless it sees a genuine and honest, a profound interest on both the Israeli side and the Palestinian side to do so. Now, what this crisis may provide is for the U.S. to come up with a day-after plan, because Israel will surely fail to do so, because the Palestinians, you can't expect them to do anything of any value, of any positive value. So the U.S. can say, okay, in broader geopolitical terms, in order to get the Saudis back on our side, in order to deter the Iranians, in order to expand the so-called Abraham Accords, we need a Palestinian component, and here's our plan. And they will lay out a plan. And they could do that by Biden, say, inviting the Prime Minister of Israel, the President of the Palestinian Authority, and, believe it or not, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. For that to happen, gentlemen, there needs to be a different government in Israel. Right now, there's an extreme right-wing, semi-fascist government in Israel that enjoys very little legitimacy in the wake of this current war and crisis. So my answer, I know I talk too much.
That's all right.
My answer to you, James, is I don't see the U.S. playing any role until it sees or it is confident that both sides are serious.
Go ahead, Al.
I want to get back to Bibi. You're no fan, and I share your views. And I think he bears considerable responsibility for this tragedy. I'm sure if there were election today, from everything I hear, he'd get clobbered. But if nothing else, he is an incredible survivor.
Yes, he is.
And could it be it's in his interest to drag out this war as long as possible in hopes that some of the animosity lessens and he can hang on?
Well, it's a fair question, but the more he drags it, the more there are casualties. The names and faces and people. This is a small country. People care about each other. People know each other. Everyone is on a first name basis in this country, even though half of us hate the other half and vice versa. And so I don't think dragging this out is going to be of any help. I do think, and I'm sure both you gentlemen have followed this to a degree. Just before this war, which began October 7th, Saturday, 10 days ago, was preceded by 9 months of political upheaval in Israel, wherein hundreds of thousands of pro-democracy protesters took to the streets to demonstrate against Mr. Netanyahu's anti-democratic constitutional coup. I believe that this political critical mass is going to morph into anti-Netanyahu sentiment just on the issue, focused on his ineptness and incompetence in this war. So, yes, he's going to try and survive. Yes, he cannot. He speaks English well, but he cannot, for the life of him, he cannot spell accountability or responsibility. These two words just don't exist in his vocabulary. And I think he will be dragged out at some point. He will be pushed out from within the political system. I mean, aided by grassroots demonstrations. He will be kicked out. I mean, even a survivor of his talents and skills comes to a point where, enough is enough and the walls are closing in on him.
Well, Alon, when they do a review of this, a report on this, it's almost, they have to conclude that 9-month campaign was a distraction from other things, a distraction from military preparedness, a distraction from intelligence. Hell, short term, Hamas had better intelligence in that area than Israel did for that. He's guilty.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And look, if he had the decency, the ethical code, the moral fortitude, he should have resigned a long time ago. It happened with Menachem Begin, the Prime Minister of Israel, in 1983 in the wake of the Lebanon War. And it happened with Neville Chamberlain in 1940 in Britain when he was seen as unfit to continue leading Britain after the fall of Norway. So the precedents are there. But again, this guy lacks the scruples, lacks the moral values, lacks the chief of the general staff, the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces chief of staff, already said, it's my fault, we made mistakes. The chief of the General Security Service, the Shabak, the equivalent of the American FBI, said, this happened on my watch, I am responsible. The chief of military intelligence, Major General Aaron Khaliwa, said, this is my bad, this is my responsibility. How does Mr. Netanyahu interpret these three mea culpas? He doesn't think it obligates or commits him. He's saying, oh, well, So now we know they misled me. They screwed up. It's their fault, not mine. My point is, Al, to you, I can go on and on. My point is, it ain't gonna work. This is one crisis too far. There are nearly 2,000 killed here. He's not going to survive this.
Well, then tell me about Benny Gantz, who is on the Unity military group there now. What role do you see him playing in that? And is he a leading candidate to be the next prime minister when Netanyahu goes?
I don't know. Here's the thing with Benny Gantz, for the benefit of whomever is going to watch or listen to the podcast. Benny Gantz, a former chief of staff, a former lieutenant general, who went into politics, wasn't very good at it. Got a lot of support, but couldn't form a government in the 4 election cycles that we held between 2019 and 2021. He then lost a lot of elevation, political elevation, in the last election, and went down to 12 seats, about 10%. Well, exactly 10% of the parliament. Now, you asked Al about the unity government. It needs to be explained. This is not a unity government. The composition of the coalition has not changed. This is a declared ad hoc temporary war cabinet in which he was brought in without a portfolio to tap on his military experience. If the war ends in 3 weeks, theoretically, Netanyahu is going to shake his hand and say, get lost. Okay, you've done your thing. But the war is not going to end in 3 weeks. And I think he may have a pivotal role, a central role in ousting Netanyahu. Will that make him prime minister? I don't know. The political scenarios and speculations here go wild, and there are too many moving parts here for me to estimate that.
Let me ask one more and turn it back to James. I was taught years ago that when it comes to the Middle East, pessimism pays. But if you want to be an optimist today and you want to look ahead and say at some point, you inevitably have to come to a two-state solution, that's Correct. The only way. And inevitably that involves doing something about those settlements and those settlers, which Correct. Is a very difficult thing to do in Israel. So if you're in your optimistic mood, Dr. Pinkus, how is that going to be resolved?
Okay, the appetite for a two-state solution is going to severely diminish, because people are going to say, what, are you out of your minds? Are you crazy? Are you a lunatic? What, are you going to give them a state with a border so they could replicate what Hamas did in Gaza into major Israeli cities? You have to be kidding. On the other hand, you're saying, guys, they're not going anywhere. There are 4.5 million Palestinians, and the number is going to reach 5 pretty soon. And they're going to say, fine, you don't want a two-state solution. You want us, you have us. And then they're going to use the Martin Luther King or the Mohandas Gandhi line of, one man, one vote, meaning the one-state solution. So in order to be optimistic and find a silver lining here, you need an Israeli government that basically admits the following formula or equation. We can't stay, and they cannot govern. So how do we bridge that gap? We should not stay, and they, at this point, they being the Palestinians, cannot govern. The only way I see is like you had in Kosovo at the time, like you had in Okinawa, for that matter, like you had in Japan or Germany. You make it an international trusteeship for 20 years, meaning Israel will vacate the territory gradually, and an international force and international civilian forces will gradually take care. Is that easy? No. Is that replete with problems? Absolutely. Did anything else work? Never. And that includes, Al, per your question, That includes getting rid of, or at least clustering the settlements. Look, and those Clinton parameters Bill Clinton parameters that I alluded to earlier, the issue of the settlements was very clear. It basically said 80% of the settlers in the West Bank, most of which are not ideological, meaning they are not there because there is a biblical covenant between God and the Israelites. They're there because of a cost of living, quality of life issue. 80% of the settlers are clustered in 11% of the territory. So Bill Clinton said, you basically annex 7 or 8% of the territories. You get rid of isolated settlements, or you incorporate them physically into the 3 settlement blocks. Israel annexes these 3 settlement blocks and compensates the Palestinians with areas adjacent of equal size in Gaza. That was a perfect solution. I mean, on paper. And it could have worked, but, the Camp David blew up. This is July of 2000. And before you knew it, Barak lost his government, and Arafat made promises that he couldn't keep, and all hell broke loose, and Bill Clinton was out of office, completed his second term 5 months later. But you're asking me to be optimistic. Go back to the Clinton parameters, and I'm not using Clinton just because James is your co-host here.
Oh, James does not mind if you pander to him, Alon. I promise you. James, go ahead.
So Alon, let me check my history a little bit. So Clinton leaves office. The Israelis are in Gaza.
By the way, James, there are sirens in Tel Aviv right now.
Right, I bet. So the Israelis in Gaza in 2005, 2006 decide they're going to pull out.
Yes.
And the question becomes, how is Gaza going to govern themselves? Well, they wanted to hand it over to Al-Fatah, the Palestinian Authority.
Yes.
When they left. And Condoleezza Rice, the provost of Stanford University, a brilliant person, said, no, you have to have an election.
That's right.
And Israelis said, don't do that because it's going to end poorly. But, of course, the provost of Stanford University, having to be a genius in the United States, insisted that they have the election. Hamas wins the election, and there's never been another election.
That's right.
So we were going on the principle that people have the right to self-determination. When they were told they're not going to determine to go the way that you want them to go, and then when they go the way you don't want them to go, you don't have another election. It's hard to think that you have something of this magnitude.
Look, we're all Democrats. I mean, small d here.
Right.
We all believe in election, but I'm sorry. You're absolutely right, James. I mean, but remember the context. George W. Bush invades Iraq in March of 2003, and then changes the purpose of the war 5 times before they all settle on, we need to democratize Iraq. Part of the democratization process of Iraq is elections throughout the Arab world, okay?
Right.
As Bush said, and as the provost of Stanford University, as James describes, Condoleezza Rice, said, Ariel Sharon, then the Prime Minister of Israel, implores George Bush, look, I know you're committed to democracy. I know you're committed to the concept of a free election. I got to warn you, Hamas is going to win in Gaza, and Hamas is going to execute people in the streets. Okay, this is not the democracy that you think sitting in the White House and contemplating everyone, replicating the American model of democracy. This is not going to happen. Bush insists, Condoleezza Rice insists, and there you have it. Hamas win the election. They summarily execute hundreds of Fatah activists, and here we are 17 years later.
Well, I mean, you know, when sometimes when you think of the stuff and the ability that nations have to harm themselves and their allies is staggering. I guess
it's a March of Folly 2.0. What can I say?
So one more question before I let you go. So parliamentary democracy, 80% of people in Israel don't like this government now.
Correct.
I mean, they and Jim Gerstein, to his credit, came on the show right after and said they're going to blame Netanyahu for this. This is my family, a bunch of Likud, my wife's family. They should have known. And part of the
this is a scoop. I didn't know that Jim Gerstein's wife comes from a Likud family.
Yeah, she's some of her. I don't know. I don't speak for his wife's family, but some of her Likud at any rate. And what he was telling me. So, but at any rate, that's. How do you get to an election? So this government couldn't stand another 48 hours if there wasn't a war going on. Is there any provision in Israeli law or custom to how you conduct an election during wartime?
That's an excellent question. Look, I don't think there's going to be an election during the war.
Okay.
What I would have expected from Netanyahu is to say, I need to manage this crisis, but I understand the responsibility. The buck stops here, and I'm calling when this is over, I'm going to call for an immediate election. That, by the way, would have freed him from a lot of political pressures, but he's not wired that way.
Right.
So the mechanism is going to be one of the following two. What we have here, it's a parliamentary democracy, obviously. So we have something which is called a constructive motion of no confidence, meaning that you can bring down the government, and now the constructive term comes in, if you give a name of someone who will replace the incumbent prime minister, and 61, or a majority, 61 being a majority, assuming everyone attends, and 61 people support Alon or James or Al.
Right.
All you need to do that are 5 people from the coalition. The coalition right now is 64 out of 120. If you have 5 rebels who say, going back to what Al mentioned, and they say, okay, our candidate is Benny Gantz, then he's out within the day. He's out. Okay, so that's one. That's mechanism.
That's fascinating. That is totally
right
new to me.
Okay, it's called a constructive vote of motion of no confidence. The second is that Likud, that there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I don't know, righteous people. I doubt that, but because you asked, I'm being polite and answering. There are 5, 6, 7 righteous people who still stand up for something and have a spinal cord and testicles and say, okay, enough is enough. We're splintering from Likud. So are you voting of no confidence? No. We want Netanyahu to resign on his own volition. He's not going to have a majority in the Knesset. They're not going to vote to replace him. Okay, they're going to say, we haven't changed our political inclination. We just will not serve under this man. The Knesset ceases to function, and then the Knesset votes for its own dissolution. That's the second way. You don't replace the prime minister within the existing system, the existing Knesset parliament, like the first mechanism, but you basically bring about its dissolution and generate a new election. These are the 2 mechanisms. These are the 2 political mechanisms. And Jim Gerstein, our mutual friend, is absolutely right. He's not going to survive this.
Well, for my part, it just pays to have somebody on the show that knows what they're talking about, and that would be an apt description of you, sir. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
No, you have been a great guest, and I'll give you one bit of good news since you are a staunch believer in democracy. Jim Jordan is going down to defeat again as Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Is that the second or the third round?
This is the second round, but it's going to be just as bad, maybe worse. It's about halfway through.
Is he going to beat the 15 rounds?
Elon, thank you so much. You have just been a terrific guest.
Really. I learned so much, man.
Please be safe.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys, again. Bye-bye.
James, if what you see in the Congress of the United States is just, inexplicable, and it's more like a banana republic, and you just can't understand what the hell is going on, there's one person to turn to, and that is the Dean of Congressional Correspondence, the senior correspondent, Washington correspondent for the New York Times, Carl Hulse. Carl, I'm not even sure you can make sense of the craziness that's going on up there.
It reminds me of Casey Stengel. Can anybody here play this game?
Yeah.
It's quite a spectacle all around, no doubt about it. And it is hard to realize, when you see Hakeem Jeffries, a lot of people go, well, Hakeem Jeffries got more votes. Why isn't he the speaker? Well, it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. And did you ever think that Jordan had a chance, given his controversial past?
I did believe he had a chance. And it was, it was pretty stunning, right? For a guy who's been basically a guerrilla tactician since he got in here, to want to be speaker, has never passed a bill. Actually, I checked, he's never met or talked to Joe Biden, so it's hard to imagine rising to speaker and not even having some crossing with Biden at some point, right? I mean, Biden's crossed with everybody. But the big thing going on here is Steve Scalise. So we're old school here. Steve Scalise went into a meeting with the House Republican Conference, came out with the most votes for speaker, and immediately they started undermining and sandbagging him. And some people, some of the more traditional institutional type in the Republican conference, they didn't like that at all.
Well, one of the other, I guess, I wasn't as smart as you, I guess, because I didn't think he'd come anywhere close. And I guess in some ways I was stunned that he got 200 votes. But one of the factors is conservative media. I mean, Sean Hannity was making phone calls on, I've never heard of anything like that. And I guess it does make a difference in that conference.
Yeah, you didn't lobby for Tip back in the day? No? Well, he didn't need your help.
He asked me not to, Carl.
Yeah. But here's what you have to get your head around a little bit. Jim Jordan, in a lot of ways, is the Republican conference, right? There's more of him and people aligned with him than there are, say, aligned with a guy like Steve Womack, who the Arkansas Republican, who's opposing Jordan right now, the approach guys. I mean, Jordan, he fits the type, he voted against certifying the election. He wants to impeach Biden. He's organized shutdowns. There's a lot to like with him among his fellow House Republicans.
We're taping this on Wednesday afternoon to air first thing Thursday, and things may happen. But it seems to me the only recourse they have now is a short-term one, which is to make McHenry an interim speaker so they can do business. I mean, they can't do any business right now.
Right. I've actually said from the beginning that I thought McHenry was probably the safety valve here. But there are a lot of Republicans, especially at the top, who don't want to go along with this. There's nervousness among Democrats about some of the precedents it would set. I don't want to get too in the weeds, but the trick for the Democrats is, they don't want to vote to install a Republican speaker, obviously, but McHenry is effectively the speaker right now, so he has limited powers. But so in some ways you can finesse that, and you're just establishing some powers for Patrick McHenry. I think the Democrats now are sort of going, well, if we can defeat Jordan, that's a pretty big win for us. And if we can keep them from putting in a permanent speaker and give Patrick McHenry some sort of temporary authority. Hakeem Jeffries, I think, did something smart last night when he came out after Jordan's first vote fail. And he made it clear that he and the Democrats aren't interested in getting the gavel. They know they can't. He said, we recognize the election results, and we're not election deniers, which of course was a big swipe at Jordan and those guys. And, but he's like, we want to help you get somewhere, especially with what's going on in Israel. So, I think there's some democratic openness to it, but it's a tricky situation, honestly, to do what they're talking about doing. But, the way they're stuck right now, that might be the only alternative.
Yeah. James Carville.
So Carl, if you're like me, when you pick up the phone, generally the first sentence that somebody utters to you, can you believe this shit? Because that seems to describe a whole lot of things. And you've been doing this forever and a day, and Al and I've been doing it every day. Can you believe that the Democrats, if you took the last party line votes since 2018, I don't think there's been 3 Democratic defections on anything.
Yeah, there's some threats. I'm sure I could find a couple.
You can find a couple. But the point is, you'd have to kind of look. All right. Now, before this, you could rattle off 20 off the top of your head. And they were always unified.
They are unified. And, Nancy Pelosi actually had a similar majority and managed to function. Of course, her people did not cross her. These are a different kind of politicians. I've been writing about them a lot over the last month. And it's like they like chaos. They are here to tear things down and rebuild it in their image. And they're willing to take the hit. Now, what's happened so far is a lot of these Republicans, or at least 20 and 22 today, they've stared at this and said, you know what, we don't want to go there. We don't want to go there. The nomination speech for Hakeem Jeffries have been interesting because Pete Aguilar has really gone after Jordan in those speeches. You guys know how these speaker nominating speeches, you stand up and say how great your guy is, and you never mention the other guy. Well, they've been focused on the other guy. And I think it's hard to quantify, but I think there's Republicans sitting there listening to that going, holy cow, are we actually going down this road? Because the Democrats are going to savage us with everything that Jim Jordan has ever done. And it's a pretty lengthy list.
So, Carl, I have no patience for people who go on TV and pontificate and say, well, it's actually the Democrats' fault. No, it's not. All right, let's stop right there. All right?
Yeah, that's McCarthy.
Suppose the Democrats, let's say they go through 2 more votes, and Hakeem, who, by the way, gets really good reviews. I mean, I always ask people, because I know him kind of, but not that well, a different generation. Right. For the most part, I mean, not for people tell me to think very hard. So look, I tell you what, we will save you. You provide us, you give us a name of 6 Republicans and a speaker that will do one thing. Now, you understand the Hassett rule is Dennis Hassett is the longest serving speaker in the history of the Republican speaker in the history of the House of Representatives, who had some issues with wrestlers, but we're still wrestling with the Hassett rule. And now Jim Jordan is wrestling with the Hassett rule. You see, there's a lot of wrestling going on.
Yeah, and Jim Jordan was a wrestler.
Yes, there was some wrestling going on there, as well as Dr. Strauss. But the House of Representatives operated from 1789 to 1999, where a majority of the House wanted to bring up a bill and vote on it. They could do it. Let us do that. Right. You can keep all your committee chairs and all your corner offices. Let's do the people's business and let a majority of the House bring a piece of legislation to the floor.
Yeah, I think that's one of the concepts that they have pitched to the Republicans. We don't want guarantees. We just want opportunity, right, to consider some of this stuff. And it's so restricted. Maybe you could even say, bring them up on suspension, where then you got to have 290 votes. But it's so foreign now to these parties, to make these accommodations. Things that were classic moves back in the past now seem rare, and it's like, you remember speakers and even chairmen were their own power centers back in previous time.
They call them the Cardinals or something like that.
Yeah, it's the Cardinals. They still call them the Cardinals on the Appropriations Committee. Their power has been diluted a little bit, but they are the ones actually who are sort of the core of the opposition to Jordan. Now, it's not all on great principle. Jordan's anti-earmark. Appropriators are pro-earmark, and they brought those back, and they don't want to lose them to Jordan. But I just think that, they see Jordan and some of the people who are in line with him, and they just know they want to cut. The appropriators don't want to have to deal with that.
So, one more question. I'll turn it back to Al. In all the coverage, you would never know that Kevin McCarthy was a human being, that he walked, he had friends, he went to some members, graduation or weddings or bar mitzvahs, and he raised money for him. He went in their districts, and they just plowed and quartered him, raped him, beat him publicly. And the public, well, he's just an automaton. He's a human pretzel. He's a bowl of Jell-O. But he has friends. Yeah. Kevin McCarthy actually has friends, and he has friends in the House of Representatives. And they're not happy.
Yeah, true.
I think he's been mistreated.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. At the hands of 8 people.
In politics at a level, and you know this because you've covered it, I've lived it, Al's covered it, is a human endeavor. Some people, there are people that like politicians, that like them as friends, that call them on the phone and mourn when their parents die and celebrate when their children get married and all the shit that other human beings do. But we do that.
Yeah. No, I think McCarthy, there are people who are voting for him in these votes. One, it's a better vote for them rather than voting for Jordan. But they do feel that Kevin McCarthy was abused. Kevin McCarthy, he now calls the 8 Republicans who knocked him out the crazy 8. So he's come up with a new term for that. Yeah. But people also think Scalise got abused. I think you're right. There's a human side to this. That
Scalise has friends. He's a personable guy. I know him. I represent him. Troy Carter's just
I called him in one of my pieces a backslapper, and that day he literally slapped my back. So, I was right on the money there.
Albert, go ahead.
Yeah, I tell you, as I say, I was surprised he got 200 votes. But I looked at some of those votes, and Tom Keene Jr., Brian Fitzpatrick, a bunch of those Californians who won just barely last time in Biden districts. Were they just sure he wasn't going to win? Because he sure as heck wouldn't have been a plus for them in 2024.
Yeah, I think that's like a party unity vote, and they're probably going to regret it in some of these places. I think the Democrats are salivating over this Jordan thing. Now, even if Jordan doesn't get in, they have the votes by these guys for him. So, in some ways, they're no matter what happens, they're stuck with those votes. But there was an element of hey, we gotta go together and do this. But they're just not getting there. And but Jordan, he's a fighter. He wants to. We'll see what happens here. But when you lose votes on the second round, it's never a good sign.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think he may try again?
Al, it's really dangerous trying to predict these things. When the vote was over, he indicated that he would, and that there's indications there the other side that more people are going to vote against him. That he's had his 2 shots. He couldn't get across the finish line. Let's move on. But these guys are stubborn too.
Let me ask you one more question. How was Trump a factor in any of this?
I think he was a mild factor. Sean Hannity honestly might have been a bigger factor than Trump. I think, these are internal. You know how these elections are. They get in the room and then out on the floor, they don't want to get caught out. I think that I think people were maneuvering around, and I think there's some Republicans who would have preferred, obviously, that Trump didn't say anything, because that makes it harder for some of these swing district guys. So they weren't thrilled with that. But Jordan is very tightly aligned with Trump, and it's the Democrats. They're just they're astounded in a way that Jordan is out there being put forward as speaker, after, the stuff that's come out of him about January 6th and, the election denialism and the voting not to certify the elections. I mean, to the Democrats, it's an affront to the House and to the Congress that Jordan was even nominated. And the thought that he could or would have been speaker, I mean, it blows their minds, honestly.
Well, I'm going to turn it back to James, but the other thing, what he did was investigations, and every damn one of them ended up, a flop. I mean, it was
they haven't gotten very far on that, and this has totally distracted them from it. I think there has been a lot of criticism. I mean, he's a partisan combatant. He's not somebody that knows how to really play the legislative game or, conduct the really kind of big oversight that both Democrats and Republicans used to do. I mean, it's all boxing and wrestling and fighting. So it's pretty amazing that somebody would be up for speaker who literally has never passed a bill.
Wow. James?
So, Carl, I have friends of mine that describe to me powers like my children do that I have not remotely have or can do anything. So people called me yesterday and says, you need to call somebody to go on TV right now and stop Jim Jordan from being speaker. Well, first of all, I have no influence on who the fucking speaker of the House is. I appreciate the compliment. But what I told people was, why would I want to stop it? I'm a partisan Democrat. All right, I actually believe that there's only one, and of course, you don't have to agree with it, but it's the only salvation the country has right now, out of mind. And I've kind of politically, I'm kind of fine with Jim Jordan being the speaker every day. And I know what's dropping on him. I know this Ohio State resin stuff is not going away. There are films coming out on this. There's stories coming out on this. Why? Let's all vote for him.
You're talking like a campaign strategist there, James, and I respect that.
Right.
I mean, but the government does need to run, agency. You want those flight controllers being paid at some point. You want people to be able to rely on their government services. Maybe I'm being a goody two-shoes.
Y'all like patriotic bullshit, but I'm into partisanship.
I respect what you're saying. And I think a lot of Democrats were looking at this going, man, we're going to pick up 30, 40 seats with this stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm confessing that I'm tempted by the powers of the winning elections or something like that. But I just...
Down and dirty, man. I like it.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, Carl, you are, we know this is a busy day for you. Every day is a busy day for Carl Hulse. And, you have been a terrific guest, as you were last time. And whenever we're confused about Congress, we want to turn to you. And that means, Carl, you may be getting a lot of calls.
Yeah. Great.
Well, when I come out with you, I kind of feel a little bit like that movie Space Cowboys. Remember when Clint Eastwood and all those old guys went into space? It kind of brings me back to that. So I'm happy to do it.
And I'm glad I'm conflicted. The American enemy says no Jim Jordan, but the Democrat enemy says, please put this guy in there.
I like it.
All right. Thank you, man. Appreciate y'all.
All right, guys.
Okay, now for the outrage of the week. I'm going to go the other way this week because there's so much depressing. And Washington can be a pretty depressing town. The vitriol, wars in Ukraine and Gaza, and the insane right wing who wants to really tear down, destroy all government. Tuesday night, I accompanied my wife to an event that was uplifting and underscored the great value of so many of our devoted public servants. This was the Service to American medals, the SAMMys, they're called, given to those federal government employees who make our lives so much better, so much richer. These included recipients who helped craft the infrastructure measure, the NASA team that was able to hit an asteroid, altering its course so it wouldn't hit the Earth, a government accounting official who exposed corruption in higher education and then facilitated student loan access for millions, 2 State Department officials who negotiated the release of Americans held in Russia and Venezuela, and FBI and justice officials who broke the code of drug lords and arrested more than 500 traffickers. And the Federal Employee of the Year who got the Sammy was the Defense Department's Laura Cooper, who created the structure to supply massive assistance to Ukraine and coordinating with allies. Thanks to all of them and to the Sammys for honoring them. There are many, many good public servants who we don't appreciate enough, James.
I couldn't agree more. And of course, I grew up in the house, and my dad was a postmaster, so an effective federal employee.
Yeah.
Worked pretty hard in doing that. I'm going to stay on the kind of better, more uplifting news because
we need
very difficult. Our friend Jim Gerstein, who we talk about on his show, has been on this show multiple times. He and his wife have 2 boys, and one is, by conventional standards, does quite well, and their other son has some pretty profound challenges. And he was telling me stories in Denver, and he and his wife and his 2 boys were there, and he, of course, as you well know, and people in their family have challenges, and were helping him in, feeding him in, making sure that he was taken care of. Elderly guy comes up to the table just out of the blue and says, I used to be governor of Colorado, and whenever I see people acting like this or treating family members, other people with kind of kindness and humanity, I feel like it's part of my job to come up and thank them and tell them what good work they're doing. And so Gerstein's like, what the hell is this guy? And he says, yes, sir. He says, what's your name? And he said, Roy Roma. Roy Roma is one of the most honorable people I've ever known in my life, and is one of the most honorable. You talked about those terrific federal employees. Governor Roma was governor of Colorado, and I might add a damn good one. And he was kind of served mostly at the same time President Clinton served, and they were obviously very, very close friends. And when he left, as opposed to getting a job in government relations or becoming part of a big law, he became the superintendent of schools in Los Angeles County, California, which might be the top 3 hardest jobs in the United States. And he just is an exemplary man with exemplary kind of values and a real record. And Governor Roma, my hat's off to you. 95 years of him.
Boy, that's a nice story. That's a nice story.
Yeah. I mean, the guy he grew up right on the Kansas border. And his dad, I think he told me, was like a postmaster and ran a general store. And he, like I did, he grew up very, very rural, but he's really a fine man.
Well, when you consider people like that, and as I said, those public servants that I saw Tuesday night, all of whom work long hours, the pay is not nearly what they can make in the private sector, and they do an awful lot of good. And I get sick and damn tired of those right-wing Republicans screaming about government waste, and let's get rid of all the bureaucrats. Let's get rid of all those insane right-wing guys.
It's all, it's pathetic. But anyway, I'm glad that we had a chance to elevate some people who do good work.
Yeah, me too. Me too. All right, James, now for our listener questions. Boy, they are so good. The hardest thing I do, I think, every week is trying to figure out which 7 we're going to use. But the first one is just tailored for you, James. It's Deborah in Laplace, Louisiana, who wants to know your take on the governor's race in Louisiana last weekend. It was a low turnout race. Did black voters stay home? I wonder if the Democratic Party even has a functioning organization in Louisiana, she asked.
Well, we're going to start with the last question first. No, they don't. But in their defense, they don't have any money. They have no power. The turnout was miserable. It was 27% in Orleans Parish. That's the same thing as New Orleans, and I'm going to have to extrapolate my friend Greg Rumer, who is best quant in the state, waiting for his analysis, but there's no analysis that's going to come back that the Democratic turnout, and particularly the black vote, was utterly miserable. And this continues a trend of low black turnout that has been prevalent since probably since President Biden been elected, to tell you the truth. And I don't know, and I keep talking about it. We talk about it a lot on this show. We keep talking about the problem. No one mentions it. No one seems to be that concerned about it. And this is just another example. That we probably weren't going to win this race anyway. But for a Democrat to get 26% in Louisiana, there are white Democrats in Louisiana. Not a lot of us, but we're there. A third of our population is black. Jesus, how do you get 26%? That's almost impossible. But that's where we are. And until somebody says, we're going to do some serious analysis here, and as Ross Perot would say, get under the hood and try to fix this, we're in a continuous low turnout loop. Somebody wake up.
James, tell us about your new governor, your governor-elect.
Well, he's a very, very, I don't want to get off on, you got to give people a chance, but the indication is he's very Trumpy. In fact, he's probably more Trump than Trump. They did run a good campaign, and they just crushed everybody. They got Bill Cassidy to endorse him because they said, if you don't, we'll run somebody against you. And he's starting with a very favorable legislature. This legislature is not in any way, shape, or form. They're as far right-wing as he is. I hope I'm wrong, but what I see ahead here, you're a black person, a gay person, or a librarian, or a school teacher, or just a person that cares about pluralism and humanity, you might be in for a rough 4 years here, dude. Rough.
James, your state, Louisiana's made a lot of progress the last 8 years under Governor John Bel Edwards in education and healthcare. Is that under threat? Can that be rolled back?
I don't know if he'll roll back. Governor John Bel Edwards, who I think is in best governor of my lifetime, particularly when you consider the circumstances he served under. But he expanded Medicaid. I don't know that, but I would be surprised if Jeff Landry took that away. But I don't know that. They're right-wing enough and mean enough to do it. Good question if that's on the table. And they don't have the legislature, if anything, is not an impediment to them. It's an accelerant. The potential here, let's hope for the best, but let's be prepared for the worst.
Okay. Next, James Drew in Cleveland, Ohio asks, why wouldn't Republicans in Biden Democratic districts become independents and make a deal with the Democrats to vote for a speaker in exchange for not supporting an opposing candidate in the next election? Democrats not supporting, because they can't make that deal. Because nobody can stop a Democrat from running. They can cut him off from any money or cut her off from any money, and the right wing would mount a Republican challenger, and the person could get caught in the squeeze. Some could survive that. Most would not. And it's a dangerous move, and Republicans tend not to make dangerous moves. So as appealing, Drew, as that sounds, I don't think it's very feasible.
There is a Democratic message here that would be unbelievable, but no one will say it. What I would say is this. So what really caused this was the Hassett Rule. And for those who don't remember, it was named after Denny Hassett, the longest Republican speaker in U.S. history, who had to leave.
Of a checkered past, but anyway, go ahead.
He had to leave because he was raping wrestlers, and he had to go to the penitentiary. But the Hassett Rule stayed after Denny Hassett went to penitentiary. And the Hassett Rule was, in order to bring a bill to the floor, you have to have a majority of the majority. From 1789 to 1999, or wherever the Hassett took off, that was not the rule. Except the Democrats would say, we want to be bipartisan. We'll do our part and say, if you allow a majority of the House to bring a bill up, then we'll support that speaker, whoever it is. You would sound so and of course, Jim Jordan has his own stuff with wrestlers. I I got anybody that's in wrestling. Don't fool with Republicans. That's my advice to you. But at any rate,
it's a pattern, isn't it, James?
It's a pattern there. You know, they're wrestling a lot over there when they wrestle these young boys. But what's wrong with that? So if say, well, I'm not being partial. I'm just saying, let's elect a speaker that lets, if a majority of the House wants to vote on a piece of legislation, then let them vote. And that's nothing radical. We went for 210 years like that. What's the problem? That way you just let them stew. And they said, well, you know, and you tell us how this really came. Dennis Hassett. Oh, yeah, I forgot. I keep forgetting. If Dennis Hassett was a Democrat, he would be every fifth word today on Fox. Every fifth fucking word going through this.
But James, go ahead. Because I watched Fox. I was dial switching last night,
right?
And I watched Fox. And it was when it was clear Jordan was going to lose. You know what they did? They were talking about how Biden screwed up the Middle East.
Of course.
Kayleigh McElhinney, that great press person and now television scholar, got on and talked about how much tougher and how much better it would have been if Trump had been in office.
Well, if Trump said it wouldn't have happened if he was there.
Right.
This is a question, because it's not fair. Is he actually deteriorating?
Trump?
Yeah, he starts so low. I don't know.
Well, you know, it's hard to say because he's been, you know, as Governor Chris Sununu of New Hampshire put it at the Gridiron dinner, you know he's fucking crazy. So you've known that for a while. So it's hard to tell if he's deteriorating or not. He does some crazy stuff.
I don't know, because he's saying things that I don't have any idea of what Judge Chutkin, I guess it is.
Yeah.
I don't know what she's going to do. She clearly doesn't want to put him in jail. He clearly has no intention of following any judicial order at all. And I'm beginning to wonder if they convict him, he just don't show up. I don't get him a warrant, I guess, after mandamus for the Supreme Court for the Secret Service to turn him over. I have no idea. But, man, this is a mess.
Well, I want to get that great Stanford law professor, Pam Carlin, former Justice Department official.
That'd be great.
She's promised that she'll come on sometime in the next couple of weeks to talk about this, because I think you raise a very important question. This, again, James, is for you. It's Jaden in Flora, Illinois. You know where Flora, Illinois is?
I don't.
Sounds like downstate, doesn't it?
It kind of does. You know, Sound like to make something on the river in Western Illinois, but I have no idea.
Jaden says, I'm almost 18 years old. I would love to eventually run for office. What would you recommend? And could you possibly share some information on getting started? I figured I would try to find out from my favorite podcast. You start with a high recommendation there, Jaden, but take it over, James.
So the best advice I ever heard about this was at the 25th, I guess, one of the reunions we had of the Clinton campaign. And so the president was kind of going through the line and, you know, greeting everybody, and came up to Kaya Andrews, who worked for me in the war room. She lives in Nashville now. And Kaya's kind of forward, and she said, President Clinton, excuse me, but this is my daughter, Asher. She's 13, and she wants to be president one day. What advice you have for her? And I'm like, God damn, Kaya, why'd you ask? You know? And he put his head back and he shook his finger. He said, two things. Study hard and meet as many people as you can that are not like you. So my advice to you is study hard and go out and meet as many people as you can that are not like you. And I would add to that advice is put yourself in situations that you're not necessarily comfortable in. It's the only way you're going to learn. So pass on to the master.
All right,
Study hard, and meet as many people as you can that are not like you.
And Jaden, when you make it big, whether it's senator, governor, president, I want you to say it all started with James Carville in the politics war room, okay?
There you go. Good luck to you, son.
Patrick in Tampa, Florida says, despite their failings, W. Bush, Romney, and especially McCain were all decent men. Do you think liberals will reevaluate how they judge good people on the opposing side in the future because of Trump? Hell, Patrick, I have reevaluated Richard Nixon. I mean, I would take him back in a minute. I'm on the fence on Sparrow T. Pass the envelope, please, Agnew. It's amazing what Trump can do. Trump is the worst president we've ever had. He is a human being with apparently no redeeming qualities. And as you say, I think I disagreed with Mitt Romney and McCain on some policies, but they certainly, were and are decent men, and no one has ever accused Donald Trump of decency.
But I guess what's interesting is if somebody's just decent, we don't care. I mean, there's no evidence that Cheney is not a good family man or anything like that, because that's in the disaster-stricken war. It was still paying for, but but you're right. If that becomes the default position, well, he's okay. At least he's not a criminal slob. Yeah. But your point's well taken. It's very well taken. Adlai Stevenson was a decent man by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, John Kerry's a decent man, by any how you look at it. So I don't know, but maybe we define ourselves down. Who knows?
We are taping this show on Wednesday, but I can report to you comfortably that Jim Jordan has been rejected again. And he apparently did a little worse than he did the first time. So, Jim, I know you spelled the name differently, but he looks like his speakership is dead. Anyway, the next question is from Dash in Austin, Texas. No. I guess the next question is from Patrick in Lexington, Kentucky, who says, why shouldn't Schumer start bringing up every single one and two-star generals and admiral nomination? They're all being held up by that idiot from Alabama, the former Tommy Tuberville, the former Auburn football coach, and keep the Senate in session 24/7 confirming them. Can the Republicans afford those optics? They are going to change the rule this week, or there's going to be hell to pay. They are hurting the American military at a time where we're sending fleets to the Mediterranean. We are helping the Ukrainians to a massive amount, totally justified, and we're worried about China. And Tuberville and company are, James, it really is, I don't know I can use the term treasonous, but it's certainly unpatriotic, and I think the Senate has to move to stop it right away.
Yeah, it's clearly aiding and abetting the enemy, I guess, intent. I'm sure that any sane jury would think that he's too stupid to know what he was doing, which is always a viable offense with Tommy Tuberville. That's why you probably wouldn't go to trial, because the stupidity defense would be very, very, very powerful in this case. I think General Ty and I have a piece coming out in Stars and Stripes on this very subject. I hope they take it. I think it's been submitted. And I never thought that we could get to this point where the Republican Party is basically silent. And I guarantee you, flag officers voted for John McCain in 2008, 79%. Okay? In 2020, assume that that Trump's on the ballot in 2024, he won't get 4% of flag officers' votes. Not that many of them are going to sway the election, but I think these people see these Republicans for what they are.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I'm looking. There's so many good questions here. This is really a tough job, James. I want you to appreciate how hard I have to work at this. But this is a good question, and it's a question worth asking just for the venue alone. Pam in Owl's Head, Maine. Head, Maine. I love it.
Okay.
Says you refer to the Jill Stein effect, but doesn't the true blame lay at the fault? This is a losing the 16 election at the fault of disgruntled Bernie voters who didn't support the party.
Well, look, when you have something that catastrophic and that close and that geographically, hit the sweet spot, think that Trump did. of course, the primaries hurt. Of course, the third-party challenge hurt. But I go back to a simple thing to make this point. In 2020, Trump got a higher percent of the vote in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Arizona than he did in 2016. Digest that. That's how dangerous the third party is. Now, he got a higher percent in 2020. He lost all 4. He got a lower percent in 2016. He won all 4. And it's not a bad poll. The Fox News poll is I can't tell you it's the best poll out there, but it's not one you automatically dismiss. They have Cornel West.
It doesn't have a clear bias to it.
No, I don't think it does. That's kind of universally accepted. They have Cornel West at 9. He's a catastrophe at 3. We can't win with Cornel West at 3. And, people will say, well, these people wouldn't come out if some maybe not, maybe some will. And, they're constantly saying the Democrats don't do anything for you. And apparently it's hurting right now in the black vote. Yeah. And people hear that. This is a scary time, man. I got to tell you, it's frightening.
I totally agree with you. And I look at this. Here's why I get so frustrated. I look at this week, and whatever the setbacks caused by the tragedy with the hospital in Gaza, Joe Biden is doing, I think, a masterful job on this terrible crisis over there. He is trying both to be supportive of Israel and also hold them back from really going crazy and making the same kind of mistakes that we made after 9/11. And his Secretary of State has just been all over the region, and by all accounts, sometimes not getting as receptive an audience as you'd like. MBS, the brutal ruler of Saudi Arabia, kept him waiting for hours. But he's doing a great job over there. And then I look at the Republican Party, and they're failing for the third or fourth time to elect a speaker. They're saying things that are just absolutely loony out in the campaign trail. And I think this should be a cakewalk. It really should be, but it ain't. And I'm like you. I am worried.
It's not a cakewalk. And, I can't imagine the pressure on these guys if they don't have any confidence in the Israeli intelligence services. They have no confidence in the IDF. We all thought, well, boy, I tell you what, the Israelis, you can't fool with them. They on top of everything. And their whole myth of invincibility is in shambles. I wish I'd asked Alon this question, but if you're in the Hamas high command right now, wherever you are, maybe you're in a tunnel under Gaza, or you're in a Ritz-Carlton somewhere in Abu Dhabi, probably, are you pleased or satisfied or dissatisfied about the way things are going so far? But when you let this loose, you had a pretty good idea what was going to happen. And is this going? I wonder if this is going like according to the plan for Hamas. I don't know.
Well, I don't know either. I would guess it depends on how it plays out over the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Right, right. But you're just sitting there as of today. Right. So if they seen anything that discourages them, encourages them, or they're just, well, this is the way it is. We knew to fight back. We got to come in for the long haul. And boy, you read about all those tunnels in Gaza. And then you read about all the rubble. And I don't, if they go in and go door-to-door fighting in Gaza City, they're going to take some heavy casualties. I mean, General Petraeus said, don't take my word, take the general's word, but there's going to be some heavy casualties.
He knows what Fallujah was like, and you've paralleled it to Stalingrad, and I think it's as dangerous. James, our final question, because we have been too domestic in the last couple of weeks, so it's coming from William in Fontainebleau, France. And William, I think, is challenging you about what he calls the never-ending talk about Biden's age. He says age is a virtue and not as important as you'd think when it comes to presidential politics. Shouldn't we focus more on how we can get him to win?
So let me explain about my friend, because a lot of people misunderstand what I'm saying. First of all, it doesn't matter what my opinion on someone's age is. I can sit down and say, look, I'm 79 next week. I think perfectly fine to be 81. I can tell you this. The American public thinks he's too old, and overwhelmingly so. And that's just a judgment that they have come to. Once a person makes that judgment, can other events, he has a really sharp press conference, or he's able to run up a flight of steps, is that going to change anybody's mind? That's the question I'm trying to bring forth to people. I have my own feelings. They're not really that important to anybody else. But I can tell you what other people are thinking, and they think he's too old. End of story. And they're not really torn on the question. They're pretty definitive.
Yeah, I talked to several really prominent Pennsylvania politicians, all of whom were publicly with Biden, all of whom were pulling hard for him to win, will help him any way they can. And they say almost every time they talk to a voter, they get the same response. Hey, he's done a good job, but he's too old. Time to go. And you got to turn that around. And that's a challenge.
I don't know how you turn it around.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't know how you persuade someone. I don't know. But right now, they think he's too old by huge numbers.
Yeah. Okay, keep those questions coming in, and any we didn't get to this week, we'll try to get to next week. But boy, you keep us on our toes, and we got old Jaden. We're going to start him in politics, and we may not be around, but when he really goes to that elevated status, James, and want to look back and see two old guys helped me back in 2020.
There you go. There's good questions today.
Thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Don't forget to send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Following this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you check out the link to our sponsor, ExpressVPN, in our show notes. We deeply thank you for supporting them, because when you do, it helps make this podcast happen. Now, to keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You also can find other shows you might enjoy on the Politicon YouTube channel, or when you search Politicon on your favorite podcast sites. And remember, please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our War Room planning.